Hi, welcome to this short video about how to use the input function in Python to get responses from a user. So here we have three examples of how to acquire user responses. So our motivation is that it's important to have a good user interaction in a program if we want the user to continue to use it. And here I'm going to show you three ways to interact with the user using the Python console. So if you're watching this video to learn and develop programming skills, it's important to remember that you learn best by doing, not by watching. And so please follow along as I demonstrate some techniques um, and learn from your mistakes. And you're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. You'll see as we go forward. Learning to program is a skill that happens from practicing, and so you have to challenge yourself to write code every day. And of course, this video is not any kind of complete anything. It's just talking about using the input function to get strings from a user. User interaction is just one piece of a solution, but it's an important piece because we need data in order to compute. So here we go. So in this video and in all my videos, I'll use the Python shell idle to demonstrate my code. And and idle ought to be part of the Python distribution you've installed. I'll be using 3.8.1 running on Windows 10. And if your system is different, well, your Windows might look slightly different. Um, in the three examples I'm going to show, it's going to be all about the user interaction, providing a prompt, getting a response. Um, And so you can run idle on your computer to get the Python shell. The Python shell is a great place to experiment with Python code, one statement at a time or a sequence of statements at a time. Um, but if you want to write a program, you need to generate a source code file, and you can use the idle editor that's available from the idle shell. Um, I'm going to assume you have some very basic knowledge of Python variables and assignments, and some primitive data types like int and string and float and boolean, and what that means, and how to use the print function and functions in general. And we're going to go a little bit into Python loops. So if you're using the Python shell, then the place you're going to go to open a text file is here. So file, you'll say file, new file, and you should end up with a couple of windows. So over here's the Python shell, and then on the right is my editor window where I can write source code. Okay, let's get going. So prompt user get strings. That's basically what this tutorial is all about. And we'll explain some terminology here. So when I ask you for something, I'm prompting you. So an ask is a prompt. Okay, so I'm going to use that term prompt throughout this. And when you give me something back, that's a response. And so I'm going to call that a response. So we have two pieces, a prompt and a response. The prompt is provided by the program and the response is provided by the user. And all of these examples will use a function called input in various ways. Um, This is the form of an input statement that assigns some text that user has typed in the console to a variable which will be on the left-hand side of the assignment operator. And the input function accepts one parameter, and that is a string, which indicates the prompt. So it accepts a prompt string and it returns whatever the user typed in the console. So if you type input in the shell without any prompt string, what you'll get is a new line. There won't be any shell prompt because you're not in the shell now, you're in the um, input function. And the input function will gather the characters you type until you hit the enter key, and then that string you typed, well, if you're in the shell, will be printed. If not, if you've assigned it to a variable, then that variable will take on the string, and then the shell prompt returns. So you can try that out. We can try that out together. So if I type input, that's calling a function. It's going to return something. It's going to return what I type, basically. And it's not going to print a prompt, but let's go ahead and put a prompt in here. So boom, I'll put a question mark as the prompt. So now it's going to print out the question mark, and I'm going to type some stuff, and I get that string stuff back. And I could have assigned that to a variable. Okay. So we're going to echo user responses using 3 different examples. So the echo program, like all programs, follows some kind of pattern. So we're going to prompt the user, we're going to get the response string, and then we're going to print the response string. So example 1, we're just going to implement this pattern. So we go step by step here. So we're just going to implement this pattern. So here's an example of one run that I did where I print out the title of the program. So echo step 1, and then here's my prompt, enter some text. Then here's what I've typed at the console. My name is Inigo Montoya. And then finally I feed that back. So I echo that back. You entered. My name is Inigo Montoya. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. So we're going to print the name of the program. So this is going to be echo, and we'll just say number 1. Okay, and maybe to separate this from the rest of the text that's going to be in the console, we'll start with a \n and end with a \n. So new line, and then we have our input. So we have to come up with a variable name. So response is equal to input, and here now I'm going to put in my prompt, enter some text, enter some text, colon, space, quote, close. So now, after this executes, I will have typed something at the console that will have been stored in response, and now I can print it out. So print, and I'll skip a line, and then I'll say you entered, and then colon, and then, oh, well, I want to put a quote here, but that would end my string. So I need to end my string with an apostrophe instead. So apostrophe, apostrophe, quote, quote, I get that. And now I'm going to concatenate to that response. So I don't know if you're familiar with string arithmetic, but if you add a string to a string, those 2 strings get concatenated. And so now I can add to the end of this another quote, and I'm done. So here we go. Now we can run this, but first we have to save it. So F5, source must be saved. OK to save, yes. And this, wrong folder. OK, so this is echo 1, so we're just going to name it echo 1. Save it. It's going to ask me if I want to replace it. Yes, I do. OK, and now I'm running. So here's my program, echo 1, enter some text. My name is Inigo Montoya. Okay, and You entered. My name is Inigo Montoya. So we're done with the first one. Okay, so we just have used the input function to prompt a user, get a response, and print the response. So here we've implemented that pattern. So now um, let's take it a step further. So now in example 2, what we want to do is repeat the pattern until the user enters nothing but return. Okay, repeat the pattern. So repeat the pattern means we're going to use a loop. And what type of loop do you think we ought to use? Well, I think we ought to use a while loop because we don't know how many times the user is going to enter strings. So an indeterminate loop is the best. So we need to understand how to exit the loop then. So if we have an indeterminate loop, we need to know how to exit. So when a user enters nothing, we want to exit. And this is what happens if user returns nothing. We get an empty string, and we can demonstrate that. So if you had in your head the question, what happens when a user enters nothing? So we can test that. So input, we can say s equals input, and so here we have the instruction, and now it's asking me to input something, but I'm going to input nothing. I'm just going to hit enter. And when I hit enter and I look at s is the null string. There's nothing there. Okay. But it is of type string. So type of s is string. And if I ask for the length of s, what do you think it's going to say? 0. Okay. So here we go. So we're going to loop over and over and over again until we get the empty null string. Now it turns out that if we say if s print true, whoops, I'm missing some syntax. Yes, that is exactly what I meant. I told you I was going to make mistakes. Okay, so print in Python 2, that would have been perfectly fine. Okay, so if s print true, else colon print false. So a string can be interpreted as a Boolean, and if it's empty, it's considered to be false. If we put something in the string, so s equals quote a quote, for example, so now s has something in the string. If we go back and execute this again, it's going to say true. Okay, so an empty string returns false, and that's how we get out of the loop. Let's work on that. So now this is echo number 2. We're going to save the file. Save as, and this is going to be echo number 2. Save, yes. Okay. So we basically do the same thing. We get a response, we print the response, but now we're in a loop. So if I say while true, we're making a loop that that goes on forever. And we have to get out of the loop. So after we get the response, we need to say if response. So if something was typed, we want to print it out. And if something was not typed, we want to exit. And the way we exit a loop is to say break. So while true, get a response. If there's a response, print it out. If there's nothing, then break out. And and we can put a little message at the end that says print and um, you entered nothing. Okay, so here we go. Now we'll try run this. F5, yes, we're going to save it. And it says enter some text. My name is Inigo Montoya. Enter some more text. Okay, so it echoed my text back, and now you killed my father. And again, it echoes my text back, and then prepare to die. Enter, it echoes my text back, but now if I hit enter, you entered nothing, and we're done. Okay, so that what we learned was when tested, a null string evaluates to false and is true otherwise, and we can exit the loop using the break statement. And so we implemented something like this in step 2. So now the third example. The third example, we accumulate the strings and do not print them until the end. So in the third example, we would type in 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines, empty line, and then at the end, here's what you typed. Okay, so an accumulation pattern is where we keep adding values to a variable. So let's have a variable called responses, and that's going to be our accumulated response. And we have to initialize that to a null string, so we do that there. This is going to be echo number 3, file, save as, echo 3. Yes, I want to replace it. Okay. So just to show you an example of this, do we still have an S? No. Okay, so we have an S equals quote a quote. And I can say S equals S plus quote B quote. And now if I look at S, now I have a B. A shorter way to do that is to use an accumulation operator, which is a plus equal sign. So I could say S plus equals quote C, and now S is ABC. Okay, so this is what we're going to do with responses. We're going to, if there's a response, we're not going to print it out because we're going to do that later. So let's take that. And delete that. And instead, what we're going to do is say responses plus equals response. But in order to get this, where each starts a new line, we need to put a new line character at the end of the line. So we need to concatenate a new line to the end, like that. So now responses is going to equal response, which is what was typed at the console, with a new line character appended to the end. And so now when we get to the end, we can type in here's what you entered. So now in this case, so I'm typing here's with an apostrophe in it. So now I need to start my string and end my string with a double quote. Double quote. So here's what you entered. Dot, 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 backslash n. Okay. And now we need to print responses. Could I have done that in one print statement? Yes, of course I could. But we'll do it in two just to separate them out. So here we go. So we're in our loop. If there's a response, we add that to responses. And if there's not, we finally break and then we print. Here's what you entered. Okay, let's try it. So, okay, enter some text. So we're down here now. Name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Okay, so entered those three things, and now I'm going to terminate with just hitting enter, and here it is. My name is Inigo. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Ah! Okay, you killed my father, prepared to die, but you get the idea. That's the way it works. So, so that's it for this short little tutorial. So we went through three examples of how to program user interaction in the Python shell. The interaction involves a prompt and a response. We use the input statement to print the prompt, and then it returns the response, and the response is always a string. And so that's a problem, because suppose we want to get a number from the user, then we'd have to do something else, and we'll talk about that in the next video. But the other thing we learned is an empty response evaluates to false, and that can be used to exit a loop. So there's a lot more to talk about. We could talk about dealing with numbers and validating input strings and converting strings to numbers or to other things, and dealing with multiple input values on a single line, for example, dealing with variants of affirmative and negative statements, because sometimes you ask a user, do you want to quit now? And you have to interpret how the user types in yes or no, and then dealing with currency is another issue. So I hope you learned something about how to use the input function. And I hope you'll consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel so I can continue to make more videos like this. Okay? So have a good day, and I'll see you again soon.